Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar, Preparing for End-of-Year Change and the Challenges. As your presenters today, I'd like to introduce ourselves. My name is Paola.
And my name is Tanya.
And we are consultants with Early Childhood Australia. KidsMatter is funded by the Department of Health and Beyond Blue, and ECA is partnering with Beyond Blue and in school context with Headspace to support whole services and schools in implementing the KidsMatter framework and undertaking the professional learning that goes along with it.
Is your school or service registered and participating in KidsMatter? If you are, the great news is that our webinars will support your progress through the professional learning. And we have been presenting a whole series of webinars in the past few months, with still more to come. So if your service or school isn't registered, we suggest you register, and we've put the link in the chat for you to sign up. Feel free to ask any questions about participation and what is involved in growing healthy minds and wellbeing. Now let's get back to today, and where we'll be reflecting on the end of year and the challenges it brings for everybody. So firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians from all the lands from which we are able to gather on today. Not only acknowledge, but also pay my respects to elders past, present and future, and all those who continue to hold the memories, traditions and ways of being for all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We recognise the importance of the continued connection to culture, country and community, to the health, social and emotional wellbeing of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. So as we begin this conversation about preparing for the end of year and consider on the challenges it brings, let's reflect on the impact of change on mental health and wellbeing for everybody. I ask that we keep in mind the history and traditions of thousands of years and draw on the wisdom of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who use land, connection to place, culture and ancestors to understand the importance of relationships during times of change. Everybody can be informed by ways of knowing, being and doing, especially how drawing on these perspectives has contributed to relationships within your community, communicated respect and commitment to reconciliation and the realising of a strong future for every Australian child.
So today we are all here to consider, learn and reflect about early childhood. Wellbeing and education. On our screen are the ways for today. Remember, looking after yourself is very important. A sense of safety is the most foundational requirement for positive mental health, a sense of security and for forming relationships. This means that people are safe to be who they are, that they are able to work to their strengths, that they're able to express their opinions and beliefs, and of course feel heard and respected, even if and when there are opposing views. We know that children learn by watching and experiencing what adults do. Being aware of how to look after ourselves and support each other can make a huge difference to each of us, to the well-being of our team and to the children in our care. Children build a picture of who they are by observing adults and modelling what they do. This is particularly important when changes are occurring. Children watch how the adults in their lives deal with it. We'll be asking you today to interact and contribute during the webinar. There will be the opportunity for you to reflect on your own practices through polls and reflective questions. Please contribute only what you feel comfortable with and when you feel okay about it. And we ask that you join us via the chat box. And this is where we will also be posting links to resources for you to copy if you're interested in further learning. Please remember to take care of yourself. We talk about mental health today. And we know that sometimes unexpected feelings can emerge, even difficult ones. So be aware of your feelings that come up for you and make sure that you're able to talk to someone if difficulties or difficult feelings occur. Have a yarn to someone. If something feels uncomfortable for you, please contact Lifeline on 131114. So let's move on to today's focus. The end of year and the challenges. Change and challenges go hand in hand with the end of the year. There are many ways educators can promote resilience, positive mental health and the wellbeing of children, families and their team as the year draws to a close. Explore with us today what educators can do to support their learning community as the end of the year and all that brings with it draws to a close. And it approaches. Today we'll be exploring aspects of end-of-year change for children, their families, for educators, and for whole services. We will be looking at how change impacts mental health and wellbeing for everyone. We'll also be looking at the educator's role with change in regards to the children, the families, preparing for it, facilitating it, responding to concerns around change, and what it means for them personally and the whole of services and schools. In Australia, the end of the calendar year marks the educational year's end, bringing many moments to review, reminisce, celebrate and reflect upon from the year that has gone by. For some of you, this will be your first end-of-year experience. And we are all at different stages within our professional journey and would like to acknowledge everyone attending today and those investing in their ongoing professional learning. So please remember to share your stories, experiences and reflections with us in the chat box throughout today's webinar.
So today we will be exploring change, and in particular end-of-year change, and why this is mentioned, and when this is mentioned, it can create stress and anxiety for many children, parents, carers and educators. So thinking about what are the challenges around the inevitable end-of-year transitions, and what can we celebrate? So let's now take a poll to see what the end of year means for you as an educator. Paola, what have been your experiences with end of year challenges and celebrations in the past?
Well, I reflecting on this, looking at it from two perspectives. As an educator, a big one for me was reflecting on how much the children had changed throughout the year, the children that had been in my care throughout the year. And as a parent, on the other hand, when my children went through these particular changes in their early learning services, I felt that it was a chance for me to see also how much my children had matured and how much they had learnt. As an educator, on the other hand, I know that there was lots of time constraints around everything that needed to be done for the end of year to prepare for the changes and to support people, children and colleagues, as well as parents and families through those changes, to get through all those. But also it was a really nice time to reminisce and have a look at all the changes that had, all the positive changes that had happened, and also reflect on the challenges that had happened, because we'd had an opportunity to overcome those challenges as well. Yeah. How about you, Tanya?
No. Yeah, lots of mixed emotions. I really am connecting with a lot of what you're saying, that there's a time for celebration, but it's, for me, I remember being a centre director and there was a bit of sadness attached to seeing these children that I'd known since they were bubs, you know, going off to school, and it's that goodbye, it's that sense of goodbye. But looking at what people have said in our poll, yeah, again, a good spread, I think, of different meanings and feelings that they attach to these moments.
That's right.
And stand up for you?
Somewhat like, as you say, saying goodbye, and I guess that was something. For me, on both ends, again, the two perspectives, one as a parent and one as an educator. For me as a parent, saying goodbye to the people that I trusted my children with, and having that sense of, wow, these educators have been part of my support network during this time, and now I have to say goodbye to them, and they've been a really big part of my life. So that was probably a tricky part as a parent, and as an educator, I've always tried to facilitate the parents going, this is a great time for you, and be as positive as I could about the change, but also, as you said, acknowledging that sadness, that there will be sadness, especially when you see those children who come through your service for a long period of time, and their families as well.
Definitely. And it's good to see, actually, Reflections is scoring quite highly on what people associate for end of year and preparing for new beginnings. Yeah, sort of a really good mix there. That's
and absolutely, it's important to acknowledge number 6, to difficult conversations and stress. I mean, even though that's a low percentage at the moment, but there is that time where changes and transitions and all this end of year can be, I guess, the point where we need to have these difficult conversations. So it's important to acknowledge that particular one as well, which we will with today's webinar.
Yeah, and what our support is as well in those moments as well.
That's
Beautiful.
Right, yeah.
Thanks everybody for contributing to that poll. I guess can be seen that changes occur constantly throughout our lives. There are big changes and everyday smaller ones. So let's explore these now and their effect on mental health and wellbeing in more depth as we move through this webinar. So change can be defined as an act or process through which something becomes different. Changes signify the end of something and the beginning of something else. And a few of you indicated that in the poll just then. So changes can involve someone physically relocating to a new environment, changing a task or activity, or even moving our train of thought in another direction. For example, educators saying goodbyes, planning for the new year, or moving into a different role. Life is full of changes for children and for adults, big and small, significant and sometimes insignificant, feeling each day and happening continuously throughout our lives. So how we approach and cope with changes depends to a large extent on the experiences of our early years. The foundations of confidence and a willingness to try new things are developed from an early age. In relation to children, when we think about changes, we often use the term transitions as we think of these big transitions for children, such as starting school or at an early learning service. However, smaller transitions are happening every day for children, moving from indoors to outdoors, from one experience to another, from playing to eating. Changes are about stopping one thing and starting another, and this requires emotional organisation. It is something we all need to do every day and a skill that we all need to learn and practice. Helping children develop the skills to understand and deal with change at an early age will assist them when trying new things and managing the events in their life as they grow and encounter new experiences and challenges. So the end of year brings lots of change for everyone. For some of us, many of these changes in the preparation, events or occasions associated with the end of year can cause stress for children, educators and families. So why does change cause stress? The way we respond to change can be the main cause of stress. Our attitude towards change will depend on our capacity for resilience. Resilience and stress are closely connected. We all experience a range of stresses in our everyday lives, both children and adults. There is also quite a bit of variability in what individuals find stressful. What is stressful for one individual may not be nearly as stressful for others. The stress we might be feeling may not be just anxiety around imminent changes. It may be about the loss of routine and the comfort of security that is found with familiar routines and rituals. Changes within early learning services, schools, and in our personal lives are compounded by the fact that these changes may create pressures that can lead to disruptions with sleep, exercise, and normal healthy eating habits. We become dysregulated, and suddenly it can be difficult to cope with things that might otherwise be fine. The fact that the end of year is also very exciting to many means a lot of us are experiencing strong but perhaps mixed emotions. On top of all that, emotions are catching as we naturally empathise with one another for both children and adults. Learning to manage stressful times can be part of the ongoing process of becoming more resilient. Building resilience comes through the development of social and emotional skills, which include coping skills. These skills enable us to manage stresses in our lives and to seek and accept help when required. These are the same skills that will help children deal with stress. Children learn and take cues from the adults around them. So it is important that adults are mindful of how they approach stressful situations and the skills they use to resolve challenges as they're modelling resilience to children. Resilience partly comes from internal factors. A resilient child has developmentally appropriate social and emotional skills that help them to name their feelings, manage their emotions, be aware of other people, solve problems, and make good decisions. Temperament has some bearing on this too. Resilience can also be affected by external factors, and this is applicable for both adults and children. When there are supports available, family, early learning or school communities, friends and the broader community, we will be more resilient knowing we can seek help and understanding that we don't have to do everything ourselves or come up with all the answers. This may be especially so in a whole of service or school setting. It's about being part of a supportive team with the relationships that have developed within that team. Resilience is something we will all keep developing throughout our lives. We will continue learning skills and gaining the confidence to deal with challenges that will inevitably occur. The patterns we develop in early childhood will play a very important role in how we continue to deal with changes in the future. So Paula will now explore this further with you.
So exploring this further, we're going to look at developing the skills for change. To understand the impact changes have on everybody, we'll look at how the skills we need to cope with change develop. In the quote by Pam Link, it says, "Research tells us what happens in the early months and years can have a profound and lasting effect on an infant's development. The younger the child is, the more likely it is that changes which are not handled well will be stressful, and that stresses will have an ongoing effect, influencing all later changes in their lives." Let's revisit how the brain works. We referred to Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson's book, The Whole Brain Child, in our early webinars on managing emotions and on self-regulation. You might like to have a look at these and revisit them at a later stage, and the links will be provided for you in the chat. The key to helping children thrive is to help all the parts of the brain to connect and work well together to manage and regulate emotions. Imagine the brain as having an upstairs and a downstairs. The more basic downstairs part develops earlier and controls basic things like breathing, heart rate and sleep. The upstairs brain near the top of our head develops later and is where more complex mental processes take place. Things like decision making, planning, control over our thinking and body, self-understanding, empathy and morality. The emotional brain sits somewhere in the middle, but is also found in areas throughout the brain. Areas in the brain are connected vertically, horizontally and diagonally, and as the emotional part of the brain is situated centrally, all connections pass through here. The emotional brain is like a filter for incoming and outgoing information. Chemicals like oxytocin, which are released when calm, and cortisol, those are released when stressed, can either help or hinder these connections. In young children, the upstairs brain is still developing, and so the demanding emotional part of the brain can easily take over. Stress can stop any one of us accessing our upper thinking brain, and for young children, the more stress they encounter, the more the emotional part of the brain will take control. For children, learning to manage and regulate their emotions is crucial in dealing with changes and any stresses change brings with it. The better social emotional competence a child has, the more they can regulate their behaviour, leading to more skilled social interactions. Self-regulation is a process which depends upon learning and maturation and is influenced by temperament. It occurs within the context of relationships, so a child's ability to develop the skills needed for self-regulation is influenced by age, temperament and experience. Also, learning begins in the womb and progresses from external to internal self-regulation, with gradually decreasing support necessary from adults and the environment. In other words, from regulated to co-regulated to self-regulated. Relationships are central to this process. The most important experience for children is the quality of close relationships. Close relationships are full of emotions and provide skills and support for the development of emotional regulation. Difficulty with self-regulation is a risk factor for mental health and well-being, and as you have seen, brain research has helped us to understand this more fully. Difficulties with self-regulation affects all aspects of a child's learning and development. Children who have difficulty with self-regulation also tend to have trouble with learning and are at risk of problems with aggression, social skills and self-awareness. Self-regulation has been ranked by educators as the most important characteristic for school readiness. Dr. Stuart Shanker, a research professor in this area, discusses self-regulation as not just being A Story of the Early Years. He states that neuroscience is uncovering insights across from the lifespan, from the prenatal months into the senior years. Enhancing on individuals' ability to regulate has a dramatic impact, not only on the well-being and learning capacity of children and teens, but also on the well-being and mental health of parents and educators. He goes on to say, we cannot consider the well-being of any child or teen without thinking of the well-being and self-regulation needs of the adults in their lives. This includes parents and educators, but it also includes grandparents and the elderly neighbour down the street. In his newest book, the link will be provided to you in the chat, Stuart Shanker talks about children's ability to deal with stress in life, whatever its source. He says this stems from the security they experience within their families. He also discusses the importance of adults recognising their own stresses.
So now we understand more about the challenges that change presents to everyone, and that change is handled very differently by each of us. What can we do to support change that will promote positive mental health and well-being for children and for adults and for ourselves? We've established that positive learning about changes in the early years sets the foundation for all of the future changes that children and adults will encounter. Whether changes are big or little, we can build protective factors for children's mental health and well-being into them. If all transitions represent a change, we know that change can be difficult for a young child who is just beginning to gain an understanding of what the world is all about. Children rely on parents and educators to cushion them from the stresses that are a normal part of the change process. Adults may depend on their family or team to support them through change. So let's look at the protective factors on the slide that can strengthen a child's mental health for changes or transitions. Protective factors decrease the chance of a child experiencing mental health difficulties and are related to good outcomes for children. They protect children when they are exposed to risk. Children may experience difficult or stressful times as part of life, such as during changes and transitions, but it is having support that enables them to be protected from the possible negative effects of these events on their mental health and well-being. The more protective factors that are in a child's life, the more resilient they are. We have out some links in the chat about risk and protective factors, and also to a previous webinar on transitions. So some children find changes difficult, while others will take change in their stride. In infancy and early childhood, everything is so new. Everything is happening for the first time, and young children don't have the previous knowledge and experience to draw upon. We need to be aware of how everyday routines and rituals can affect the child's well-being. The first time for anything can be frightening, and that is happening for young children on a regular basis. Small things such as loud noises and being picked up suddenly may be stressful, as they have no warning that something is going to happen. Dr. Bruce Perry says that even nappy changes have been shown to cause a stress response. The infant has large people pushing them around. They're in a vulnerable position and have no language to understand or previous experience to predict what is going to happen. For those of us familiar with the approach of Pickler and the circle of security, we know that being with is such an important part of supporting children through a care moment or a transition. Respectfully letting them know change is about to happen and allowing time for them to respond to our cue. Behaviour is often the first alert to children experiencing difficulties. Children let us know through their behaviour what they are thinking and feeling. So they may exhibit behaviours typical of younger children. They may have shorter concentration spans. They may show less capacity than usual to follow instructions. They may test previously established boundaries or have heightened emotions, be more likely to cry or act out. It can be helpful to think of children's responses to transitions and the change associated with many of these small transitions as keep it the same kind of children. Do you work with children who could describe like that? Generally, these children tend to react to even the smallest of changes, a new food on their plate, someone coming and sitting next to them, any slight change in their daily routine. They may thrive on order and predictable routines to feel safe and secure. They may need more time and support to get comfortable in new surroundings or with new people. They may come out with comments like, no, 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 until they have time to adjust. Or they may find it much harder to regulate their emotions. They can be triggered by either minor changes, for instance, a new pair of shoes, or major changes, such as a new educator in their space. Emotional upsets can occur at any time during everyday transitions for these children. When they are asked to stop doing something they're happily involved with, the end of something and moving on to something new. Then we have the take it in their stride kind of children. These children tend to find new things exciting and enjoyable as they anticipate what's coming next, and they adjust well to changes of clothing, activities, routines, foods, and people. They adapt well in almost all environments. As babies, they can settle to sleep anywhere. They enjoy looking and watching. Even as babies, they tend to engage newcomers by smiling, cooing, and looking them in the eye. They may project a sense of openness and ease, which elicits warm, positive responses from everyone they meet. But as we know, most children fall somewhere in the middle. They may have an easy time with a range of educators in their room, but when new foods are introduced, they may get upset. They are comfortable with new adults, but get upset with new children introduced into their room. It is important for us to think about this by putting ourselves into the children's shoes. What might the child be thinking or feeling as they encounter a new situation? What might we feel in the same situation? Let's move on now to how we can support change.
So how do we support change? The Bronfenbrenner ecological system model recognises that there are multiple influences on children's mental health and well-being, which influences children's behaviour. The child is at the centre of this model, and development occurs within the context of relationships with family, early learning service, community, and broader societal factors. The child never acts in isolation, and neither do we as adults. It is also important to acknowledge how each child or adult's special genetic and biologically influenced personality traits, so their temperament affects how others treat them. The Early Years Learning Framework talks about building a sense of belonging, security, and feeling included. And outcome 1 of the EYLF, children have a strong sense of identity, states that children feel safe, secure, and supported and use effective routines to help make predictable transitions smoothly. So we can see the link between providing for and supporting positive changes, which is a means to supporting a child's positive sense of identity and self, which is also a protective factor for children's mental health and well-being. Educators can observe, reflect on practice for transitions, and plan for changes within their service to provide positive, secure, and inclusive transitions for each child. We will be providing you with the links to the NQS in the chat, so you can have a look at those as well. Relationships are what transitions should be about, not the procedures and the processes such as packing up, moving on from one experience to another, moving from inside to outside, but providing opportunities for educators to really engage with children and support small transitions as the basis for all future bigger transitions. You will often hear early childhood educators say, it's all about relationships. Children learn through the relationships in their lives by experiencing them and observing them. It is important for us to reflect on the quality of relationships with children and families and with each other. The quality of relationships is critical. Quality relationships should be inclusive of being respectful, sensitive, responsive, consistent, secure, and stable. All changes or transitions can be opportunities to support mental health and well-being, but they can also be times that create risk factors for someone's mental health, now or in the future if the protective factors are not in place. Supporting change requires communication between everyone involved, for example, the child, the family, or the educators. It also requires responsiveness and flexibility. Things don't always go to plan, so having a backup is essential. Needs can change, so communicating and reviewing is very important. We also need to look at planning for transition, and it all comes down to how we prepare for and navigate and then review the transition process. We also need to acknowledge and accommodate for individual needs and capacity during transitions by using inclusive practices. How can we further assist children to cope with the changes they will encounter? We can help children by making transitions as positive and stress-free as possible and by helping children learn to cope with the changes. Bruce Perry, the Early Years Learning Framework and the National Quality Standard indicate that supporting children with change means providing transitions that are nurturing, predictable, gradual, and attuned to the child's developmental stage. We see small changes as the foundations for the bigger transition children will face in the future. And some examples are dealing with changes in the environment, so the physical layout, sudden noises, different educators, or unplanned changes in routine, or physically moving from one place to another when asked, or sometimes separating from parents, and of course, allowing interruptions in their play by peers, adults, and educators. While we have touched on the role of families and change, let's look at it a little more closely.
We've talked about the importance of relationships as a key factor in supporting change, but would now like to look more closely at the partnership between parents and educators in supporting transitions and change, and the impact of transitions on families. All children are different and react to change differently. Some children may need individual support. Educators and parents can work together to manage change and share knowledge to learn what will help each child the best. Families know their child best and can work in collaboration with educators to consider what stresses can be removed to support the individual child. The transition to an early learning service or school are considered important milestones in the lives of both children and families, but it can be a challenging time for any family. However, in Australia, the transition to school or an early learning service is likely to be more challenging for some families and children. Children from financially disadvantaged families, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families, families with children who have a disability, and culturally and linguistically diverse families can find the transition to an early learning service or school very stressful. The transitions for these groups of families can impact not only the children, but also the parents as they find themselves in a position where they feel additional stress, perhaps financial, social, and emotional. They may feel pressure to meet certain expectations and are concerned with their ability to do this. They may suffer anxiety around whether their children will be eligible to access additional support and resources. They may feel that they lack information or do not have the understanding to make confident decisions, and as a result, they feel marginalised. The relationships between parents and educators may be difficult to build with these groups. There may be barriers in engaging and maintaining their relationship. We have to find effective ways to communicate to families that we want to work with them collaboratively to ensure the transition and changes support positive mental health and wellbeing for their children. As educators, we may also need to assist parents to access support to learn to manage their own stress and build their own resilience so they can support their child. Let's now look at some strategies for reducing the stress of transitions and changes at the end of year in early learning services and schools. We have some suggestions for maintaining calm and reducing stress at the end of the year. If you have any other suggestions, please pop them into the chat box. Some ideas are to maintain physical and emotional connections with children on an individual level. It might be easy to lose touch with one another in the busyness, but the one-on-one connection is just as important as other times of the year. Try to keep routines as intact as possible. This will help people, both children and adults, to relax, especially at the beginning of the day. Establishing a sense of calm predictability will make a difference. Keep some known favourite experiences for children to engage with as they experience out-of-the-ordinary celebrations. This might be something sensory, such as clay or water play, something creative, such as drawing or painting, dramatic play props, or spaces to spend time in alone. Whatever the children normally enjoy, keep at least part of the space arranged as it usually is. Routines and rituals are also about the order that you and the children do things in. The definition of a ritual is a sequence of actions which promote love and care and create a warm connection or memory. So marking time and maintaining these rituals for certain times of the day, such as lunchtime or rest time, will give everyone a sense of familiarity and structure. As we all know, visual supports aid memory, calendars, visual timetables of the order of events, especially if there are changes. Children may need to hear and see extra detail about what is coming next. And remember to be kind to yourselves and to others. There is a lot going on and things can feel very demanding. Don't expect perfection from yourself or from others. The good thing to remember is that by the end of the year, most relationships between educators, children and families are generally well established and we're able to anticipate difficulties and be responsive with each other. This means that we're in a position to notice when somebody needs a little bit more support at this time. Some families may need extra support if they have challenges in their lives or family situations. I can see there's been a few comments in the chat. Paula, are you able to see these?
Yeah, and there's some really good examples as well of how educators are supporting the transitions. We also have a really nice outcome from Leah, who's suggested making the transition statements that teachers are required to complete more user-friendly for both teachers and families. So that's a really nice reflection to be thinking about as well.
And Hayley said, sorry. You go, Paula.
Okay. So now we have been talking. We've been talking lots about children and change, but we must also acknowledge that the end of the year will bring with it changes. And preparation for changes are inevitable for stresses for adults, so both educators and the parents as well. So for educators, they may be preparing for transitioning children from one room to another or to a school or a new service. They may also be preparing for the arrival of the new children or moving from one room to another or from a particular role to a new role. There'll also be changes within staffing or sometimes management changes. And also educators could be looking at end of year transition and summary reports, the celebrations that go along with end of year and preparing any portfolios or documentation, and of course the fun job of cleaning and reorganising equipment and furniture. Educators might also have personal celebrations to plan for, including their own partner's work functions or their own children's school events, and have their own children, they may also be transitioning into a new setting. For parents, some examples might be preparing for their own family celebrations. They may be feeling work-related pressure to achieve certain goals before the end of the year, and they may also be experiencing some relationship changes for some parents, and they may even be looking at heading back to work for themselves or sending their child to a different school or a different service. And they may be experiencing anxiety about what that new setting or that new educator will be like. So also adults can use language, and it's important to recognise that as adults we do use our language and we have previous experiences and knowledge which enable us to make predictions on what the change will be like, such as what it's going to be like going to work in the morning, or what it means and what our reactions might be. And we can build on those strategies and they help us as adults to adjust and cope. However, even then, there are many changes that are very stressful and that we have difficulty with. Parents may be preoccupied with their own feelings and thoughts, and this uncertainty is easily transferred to the young children who are now experiencing a lack of predictability and stability within their home. At the end of the year, adults may become deregulated, as we discussed earlier, and may at times feel overwhelmed. They may seem to forget things. Sometimes they think they've given instructions when they haven't, or they may just become less tolerant or patient. Some adults also become less available and have less time to give to children, to their families, to their colleagues. They could be a little bit distracted. And of course, the big one, they could be experiencing a lack of sleep. As we grow older, we cope better with changes for a number of reasons. As I said before, adults have language and knowledge to be able to understand what the change means and to predict what could happen. We've gone through many changes before and learned ways to manage. And we have more power to be able to impact on what happens to us. So we have a little bit of control over our own future. We usually know people who will support us also in difficult times, and we'll reach out to them when needed. We have a support network to call on, and we create a support network to call on. And we can see the benefits that the changes are bringing us at times. Link has a quote that says, "Nevertheless, Even adults find many changes stressful, and when they are outside previous experience or very overwhelming, adults too can suffer trauma from some changes or transitions. However, what is stressful for an adult, maybe a loss of job or injury or loss of a friend, is usually much bigger than what may be very stressful for an infant. Children also feed off our stress. They can be stuck in the middle, stress because of adult stress and stress because of their own impending changes. It is really important that we as adults manage our own stress adequately so it does not impact on children. Let's look now at what the end of the year looks like. And let's take a moment to think about what that looks like. Celebrations and rituals are important because they help us make sense of transitions and milestones which support mental health and well-being. By including educators and families in a meaningful way, you are supporting everyone through the end of year changes. What is the end of year about at your service? Tell us in the chat and share with us. So what drives end of year events at your place? When you begin planning these events, are you critically reflecting on both the group and individual children's learning and development outcomes, or is it about family, community, or educator expectations? Something to consider are Grace Hopper's words. The most dangerous phrase in the language is, "We've always done it this way." Is the end of year really just about Christmas? Or is Christmas just a vehicle commonly used to create opportunities to connect, belong, share, acknowledge achievements, farewell, and ultimately show we care? It's valuable to learn about Christmas, like it's valuable to learn about Ramadan, Hanukkah, Chinese Lunar New Year, St. Patrick's Day, Diwali, or other festivals. Family traditions around these celebrations contribute to children's sense of self, identity, and belonging, but the end of year does not have to be all about Christmas or other religious and cultural events. So what other ways do services and schools celebrate the end of the year and mark the changes for everyone in your learning community? We're getting lots of feedback in the chat, which is really lovely to see. So have a look at those comments. At your service, you might have a ceremony marking children's transition to school and the end of an era in their lives. This type of celebration could be seen as a graduation. I use that term with caution, but just like Christmas, not all graduations are the same, and it is how we present them that needs to be given careful thought and consideration, as well as its relevance to the children. If you are heading down the graduation path, you might want to seriously consider, what is the purpose of the event and who is benefiting most from it? How will you support any children who are not graduating with their peers? Are you really being inclusive? Are we being with the children in this, or are we leading them in directions that are not relevant or necessary for them to enjoy their final weeks in the service? One very popular strategy that does not have to exclude non-graduating children's families is the end of year party, and we can see from the chat that that's what a lot of services are doing. These can be held during a session time or as a weekend or an evening gathering, a time where children can share their early learning service or school with their family. Another option, a very simple option, is to spend 15 minutes on the children's final day when their educator could present them with their portfolio. Some services involve children in a concert of some kind, perhaps they use favourite songs for their families, and some use it as a time for families to engage with their child in their favourite play experiences. Others have a display of children's artwork and photos from throughout the year, a bit like an art show. Communities where reconciliation is embedded in their practice often mark end of year change with a smoking ceremony, and some use fundraising money to purchase entertainment for singers or magicians to come in and visit. There are so many options for you to consider and adapt to the unique context of your community's current children and families. We hope that whatever you choose to do to celebrate the end of the year is something that brings enjoyment and reflection to all the children, their families, and all the staff in your service. And it also creates good memories for everyone to draw on in the year to come. It's also important to reflect on, how do you make the decision about what should most appropriately mark the end of the year at your place? Do you seek input from families or the educators? Do you encourage and celebrate the diversity in your community? And are you avoiding excluding people from celebrations because of financial requirements restrict their participation, or the purpose of the event is not relevant to some particular families? There are some more links in the chat to read about different perspectives on the end of year, and we do hope that you get a chance to have a look at these links in your own time. So as the end of year brings changes for everyone, it also brings with it concerns around these changes. Parents may have concerns about their children transitioning to another room or setting or school. Will they settle easily? Is their child really ready to move on to the next setting? Will my child develop the same relationship they had with the previous educator for both the parents and the child? That's a joint concern. Or will the new educator understand their family situation? Parents who have concerns about their child need to feel valued, safe and reassured, but they also need to have reliable, honest information shared with them in an empathetic way. Have a look at the link in the chat. This is a great tool to use when you are organising to meet with parents to discuss concerns. You need to provide families with as much information as possible about changes to alleviate the stress of the unknown. Sometimes being able to show a parent the new room or introducing them to the educator their child will have for the following year, or even simply giving them the name of the new educator will be reassuring. Transitioning to school is usually more formal with organised visits, tours and information sessions available to parents. However, some concerns may be around the child's readiness for school or other personal concerns relating to the family situation. You need to listen to families. There are several tools to help you do this. One is the tool Stop, Reflect, Act. Throughout the year, it's important to establish a two-way open and honest sharing with parents. So when there are concerns, there is an established and trusted relationship already in place. Acknowledging family knowledge and expertise about their child helps to communicate to parents that educators care about and want to work jointly with them in order to come up with solutions and make decisions that are really helpful for the well-being of their particular child. We encourage you to have a look at the recording of one of our previous webinars on communication if you have not already seen it. And again, the link will be provided for you in the chat. Something else to explore is Pam Link's Everyday Learning About Managing Change, which provides advice, tips and ideas on how to help children cope with changes, like starting school, moving house, getting a new brother or sister, and much more. Chapters cover such topics as personal qualities that help cope with changes, some things you can do to help children with changes, toddlers and change, and when children don't manage change. Educators and health services may also have concerns of their own. There may be staffing changes within their team, with some moving into different roles, some leaving the service and new staff joining the team, or there may be a change of management. This will be a source of anxiety for some, depending on their individual capacity for resilience and the supports in place within their learning community from managers and colleagues and in their personal life. Let's move on to the next slide about educator wellbeing. As educators, your team has to facilitate the end of year activities, whatever they may be, and also deal with the changes within the service and your own personal lives. When working with children and families, we can contribute to environments and experiences that support wellbeing, and we can also model wellbeing. There is certainly a place for self-care and team wellbeing in the National Quality Standards and professional learning plans. And by looking at the importance of wellbeing for yourself, your team and your colleagues, you are also addressing these standards. The workplace is an important part of our daily lives. Being aware of how to look after ourselves and support each other can make a huge difference to each of us and to the well-being of our team. Everyone has a role to play in creating a mentally healthy workplace, and simple actions can make a big difference. So we will be considering how to be mentally healthy from those two perspectives: how we can operate as a team and support each other, and what we can do for ourselves with end-of-year challenges and celebrations. You may like to listen to one of our previous webinars on educator wellbeing, yours, mine and ours. Again, the link is in the chat for this webinar. In that particular webinar, we made a reference to a podcast about wellbeing with Adriana Huffington from the Huffington Post, where she referred to burnout as the disease of civilization and went on to make a humorous analogy that we take better care of our phones than ourselves. Sometimes this is true. With the end of the year approaching, educators not only have the responsibility of caring and educating children and all that comes with it, talking with parents about their concerns with children transitioning to another room or another setting, but there may also be other challenging workplace demands, such as organising NW events and planning and preparing for changing roles, as well as staff changes. Added to this may be the personal changes that everyone has in their own personal life. Perhaps your own child transitioning to school or to a new service, organising a holiday or a family celebration, a change in personal relationships, separation or divorce, changing jobs or moving house. Our wellbeing is important for us personally and it makes us more effective in our work. To fulfil the roles of the job, no matter how passionate and committed we are, we need to know how to look after ourselves by managing stress and learning a sense of balance in life. We all need some downtime to recharge and reground ourselves. Being professionally resilient can prevent or minimise the effects of demanding and challenging environments on mental health and wellbeing. So let's talk a little bit more about professional resilience in the next slide.
So what is professional resilience? Professional resilience is about our individual capacity to thrive in situations of high demand and ongoing pressure. It involves being able to recover from significant challenges, difficulties and setbacks, and then use these for learning and personal growth in the workplace. Often the choices we make in responding to difficult situations, such as our attitude and our willingness to take action, demonstrates resilience. We can all play a role in supporting the professional resilience of our colleagues and ourselves. Professional resilience requires us to have supportive relationships in place with our team. We have the capacity to tolerate a lot more stress when we have supportive relationships with managers and colleagues. This is because relationships, as with children, are so important. They help us to share ideas, vent our frustrations, obtain support, and generate plans for tackling challenges in our workplaces. Thinking positively and looking for the positive in situations can lessen stress and allow us to act more constructively. How we feel is often a consequence of how we think and behave. It is also important to understand what can and can't be controlled, especially when change is occurring all around us, which is often the case at the end of the year. Becoming aware of your strengths can help you draw upon them during challenging and demanding situations. When you enjoy the work you do and feel satisfied, you are less likely to be affected by the parts of your work that you don't particularly like and that create stress for you. Professionally resilient people are prepared to act. They focus on what they can do to overcome challenges, reduce stress, or manage a difficult situation. Look after your health and well-being. Outside of work, do things to recharge and to have a good work-life balance, socialising, resting and relaxing, eating well, getting sufficient sleep and exercise. Bringing an element of fun and humour into your workplace can also help ease stress and make some of the demands of work easier to overcome. It also supports the development of these positive relationships that are great for reducing stress. Workplaces can promote professional resilience too, by acknowledging the reality and demands of our workplace, by supporting self-care behaviours in all staff, by providing forums for discussion and strategy sharing, by providing opportunities for staff to express strong feelings, introducing a mentoring system where educators are given opportunities to share and reflect on experiences with their colleagues, encouraging opportunities for further education and professional development, enabling educators to use their strengths in their day-to-day work, and communicating relevant information that has an impact on the work educators do in an effective and timely manner. So if you're interested in more information on professional resilience, please see the link in the chat. So we encourage learning communities to consider how they support their team in their learning and how to practice self-care. Reflective practice is not just about the children, but can also be about how you are travelling individually and as a team. Consider how is professional development and support provided at your service. Consider what is done well and what could be done differently. Take time to reflect. Consider using the Beatles chart for yourself. We have looked at the Beatles before. a tool for observing children. But can we use it as a tool for reflection? We have a copy for you in the chat box. And the end of the year is a busy time, and we can often overlook reflecting on the past year, except in terms of planning for changes in the coming new year. But we should take time to reflect on the year ending and celebrate the successes, big and small, which is so often neglected in the rush to get another year of end-of-year activities completed. So you may want to ask your consultants to assist you in identifying your successes. That's what we're here for. So as we're coming to the end of today's webinar, there's a question in the chat box for you. You might like to respond to that. So thank you all for your participation. Stay tuned for information about the final webinar for this year, which is scheduled for December 6th, and details are available soon. As many of you know, these webinars are great ways to not only learn, reflect and put learning into action, but they also assist in demonstrating our individual commitment to continued professional development. But have you heard they can also support documentation and guide whole service or school professional learning and continuous improvement? So contact our team today and we can assist you. For anyone already with a participating service or school, simply contact your consultant. Let them know what you have learned and acted upon after this event. Would be all you need to finish one of your professional learning topics that you've been focusing on for some time. Join the check-in event and talk about what you have learned and done soon. And remember, remember though that check-ins aren't check-ups. Often consultants spot great learning in action that is being done without educators noticing. It's often easier for a pair of outside eyes and ears to notice.
KidsMatter is transitioning into the National Education Initiative very soon. Stay tuned, as all KidsMatter participants will become part of this new National Mental Health Initiative. If your service or school isn't a registered participating service, it is as simple as completing a short online form and then getting started, and then you will become part of the National Education Initiative too. If you would like to know more about what is involved, check out how to start the process now online. Remember to complete the exit survey that will be put up at the moment. And please include the names followed by the email addresses of anyone that is watching with you today. It is really important to include everyone's name and all the email addresses so they can get a certificate as well. And as a last little check-in, we'd just like to say thank you to everybody for attending today. And as we can see from the chat, we've had lots of participation and there's some really great comments from all of you. So one of the comments that I really liked was the timely reminder of supporting each other as educators within your educational setting. That's really lovely. And reflecting on end-of-year celebrations and making sure everyone is supported. I think that's really nice comments that's come from today.
Great reflections. Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. Taking the role of supporting each other as educators is really, really nice. And making sure that we ourselves look after ourselves as educators.
Thanks so much, everybody. It's great to have you online today.